The crystal shards glitter across the marble floor like scattered diamonds, beautiful and deadly, and I cannot move. My bare feet are surrounded by the remnants of what was once a $1,000 vase, and somewhere beyond the ringing in my ears I can hear Alexander breathing, each exhale a controlled violence that terrifies me more than the screaming would. His fist is still embedded in the wall, plaster dust coating his knuckles like snow, and when he turns to face me, his eyes are black ice, frozen rage that burns colder than any fire. Who is Thomas? His voice is quiet, almost gentle, and that is how I know I am in danger. I open my mouth, but nothing emerges except a strangled sound, my throat closing around the words like hands around a neck. He crosses the distance between us in 3 strides, glass crunching beneath his Italian leather shoes, and I flinch backward, but there is nowhere to go, the window behind me a sheer drop of 40 stories into the glittering Manhattan night. My phone is clutched in his other hand, the screen still illuminated with the notification that started this. A simple message from Thomas, asking if I needed him to call in my prescription refill. He is my doctor, I finally manage, and my voice sounds foreign to my own ears, thin and reedy like a child caught in a lie. Alexander laughs, but there is no humor in it, only the sharp edge of something breaking. Your doctor. He says the words like they taste of poison, rolling them across his tongue as if searching for the truth hidden within. I have been with this man for 3 months now, pulled into his orbit on a rainy Tuesday when he appeared from the shadows of that alley like an avenging angel, dispatching the 2 men who had cornered me with brutal efficiency before turning those same dangerous eyes on me with something that looked almost like tenderness. I learned later that the mugging was not random, that I had stumbled into territory disputed by men who kill over street corners, but by then I was already drowning in Alexander Sinclair, already lost in the undertow of his intensity. He saved my life and claimed it in the same breath, installed me in this penthouse prison with its silk sheets and surveillance cameras, and I told myself it was protection, told myself the gilded cage was still a sanctuary. Now the guilt is peeling away to reveal the iron beneath. He is the physician at my clinic, I continue, forcing strength into my words even as my hands tremble at my sides. He helps me with my anxiety medication. The pills I need because of this, because of you, because loving you feels like standing at the edge of a cliff and waiting for the wind to decide my fate. Alexander studies me with those penetrating eyes, and I watch the war play out across his features, possessiveness battling reason, jealousy wrestling with the part of him that knows this madness is exactly that. Then he looks down at my phone, his thumb moving across the screen, and I realize with sickening certainty that he is reading every message, every innocent exchange, searching for evidence of a betrayal that exists only in his fractured imagination. Now please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from and what time is it. It is always fascinating to see where these stories get all around the world. Thank you. I watch his thumb scroll through the messages, each innocent exchange about appointment times and dosage adjustments becoming evidence in a trial I did not know I was facing. Tuesday at 3. Eleanor, let me know if the new prescription helps. Thinking of you, hope the breathing exercises are working. Call me if you need to talk. The words are professional, kind, the messages of a doctor who genuinely cares about his patients, but I see them differently now through the lens of Alexander's suspicion, see how they could be twisted into something intimate, something damning. His jaw tightens with each text he reads, and I can trace the tension climbing up his neck, settling into the sharp lines of his face, like storm clouds gathering over a familiar landscape. He helps me manage my anxiety, I say again, and my voice breaks on the word anxiety, because we both know what caused it. This constant state of hypervigilance, this feeling of standing on a precipice, waiting to fall. The irony is not lost on me that the pills I swallow each morning are meant to quiet the racing heart and trembling hands that Alexander himself inspires. I remember the night we met with crystalline clarity, the rain slicking my skin as I cut through that alley to save 5 minutes on my walk home from a double shift. The sudden appearance of those two men with their hungry eyes and reaching hands. Then Alexander materialized from the shadows, like something conjured by my terror, dispatching them with a violence that should have horrified me, but instead left me breathless, captivated by the predatory grace of his movements. He looked at me afterward with blood on his knuckles and something like wonder in his eyes, asked my name in a voice like velvet over steel, and I gave it to him without hesitation. I did not know then what he was, did not understand that I was trading one danger for another, stepping from the temporary threat of street criminals into the permanent possession of something far more powerful. He throws my phone onto the leather couch with a dismissive flick of his wrist and stalks to the window, his silhouette cut dark against the glittering cityscape, and I see the violence coiled in every line of his body, a serpent waiting to strike. "I will verify your story," he says without turning, his breath fogging the glass. And the words are calm, but I hear the threat beneath them, the promise that if I have lied, there will be consequences I cannot imagine. In this moment, I understand fully what I have only suspected, that the penthouse with its marble floors and priceless art is not a gift but a prison, that the security guards in the lobby are not protectors but wardens, that I have been a captive all along without ever seeing the bars of my cage. I wrap my arms around myself against a cold that has nothing to do with temperature and wonder how I will survive the night. Wonder if the man I have grown to crave will become the monster I have always feared. Wonder if there was ever any difference between the two. He pulls his phone from his jacket pocket with the deliberate precision of a man accustomed to ending lives with the same casual motion, and I watch his thumb move across the screen as he raises it to his ear, his eyes never leaving mine. "Marcus," he says, and the single word carries the weight of command, of absolute authority that expects instant obedience. "I need a full workup on a Dr. Thomas Fairfax, physician at the Eastside Community Clinic, and I need it within the hour." He pauses, listening to whatever response comes through, and I see the ghost of a smile cross his lips, but it holds no warmth, only the cold satisfaction of a predator who has caught a scent. "I want everything," he continues, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly soft register that I have learned to fear more than shouting. Medical school records, financial history, known associates, romantic entanglements, parking tickets, every digital footprint he has ever left. If this man has so much as jaywalked, I want to know about it. He ends the call without goodbye and slides the phone back into his pocket, and the silence that follows is suffocating, pressing against my chest like physical weight. "This is insane," I finally manage, and my voice sounds steadier than I feel, a small victory in a war I am clearly losing. "He is just a colleague, a doctor at the clinic where I work. He writes prescriptions and asks about my day, and there is nothing between us except professional courtesy." Alexander crosses his arms over his chest and regards me with an expression I cannot read. Something shifting behind those dark eyes, like shadows moving beneath ice. "The last woman I trusted," he says, and his voice is perfectly controlled, but I hear the fracture lines running through each word, "was sharing my bed for 2 years while feeding information to my enemies." He takes a single step toward me, and I force myself not to retreat, to hold my ground even as every instinct screams danger. She smiled at me every morning and whispered that she loved me every night, and all the while she was selling my secrets to men who wanted me dead. He is close enough now that I can smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that I once found intoxicating, but now seems to close around my throat like fingers. "My brother Daniel died because of her betrayal," he continues, and for the first time I see something crack in his facade, a flash of grief so raw it steals my breath. "He was 27 years old, the same age as you, and they executed him in a warehouse in Queens because a woman I loved decided his life was worth less than the money she was promised." I feel my anger softening despite everything, feel the first treacherous stirrings of understanding. Because I am looking at a man who has been shattered and rebuilt himself into something harder, something that trusts nothing and no one. I did not know, I whisper, and the words feel inadequate against the magnitude of his loss. He reaches out and cups my face in his hand, his touch gentle despite everything, and his eyes bore into mine with an intensity that makes my heart stutter. You are not leaving this penthouse until I know the truth about your doctor, Eleanor, he says softly, and I understand with terrible clarity that I am trapped in paradise, a prisoner of crystal and silk, and the only key to my freedom lies in proving an innocence I should never have had to defend. The guest room is beautiful in the way that museum exhibits are beautiful, pristine and untouchable and utterly devoid of warmth. And I lie in the center of the king-sized bed staring at the ceiling, where recessed lighting casts soft shadows that do nothing to quiet my racing mind. Sleep refuses to come despite the Egyptian cotton sheets, and the silence so complete it feels like being buried alive. And after 2 hours of counting my own heartbeats, I slip from the bed and pad barefoot into the darkened penthouse, drawn by some invisible thread toward the sliver of light spilling from beneath his study door. I find him in a leather chair that probably costs more than my annual salary, a crystal tumbler of amber liquid in his hand, his tie loosened and his collar undone in a way that makes him look almost human. He does not seem surprised to see me standing in the doorway in the silk pajamas that appeared in the guest room closet. My size, my preferred color, another reminder that he knows things about me I never told him. Sit, he says. And it is not quite a command, but not quite an invitation either, somewhere in the space between where we always seem to exist. I take the chair across from him and watch the city lights play across his features, softening the sharp angles, hiding the predator beneath the sophisticated veneer. You should be sleeping, he says, but there is no reproach in his voice, only a weariness that mirrors my own, and I wonder how many nights he spends like this, alone with his demons and his expensive whiskey. I could say the same to you, I reply, and something flickers in his expression, surprise perhaps at my boldness, or maybe just acknowledgement that we are both haunted creatures keeping vigil against the dark. He asks about my life, the real one, the one that existed before he crashed into it like a comet reshaping everything in its path, and I find myself telling him things I have never spoken aloud. My father died when I was 9, a construction accident that left my mother shattered, and me suddenly responsible for holding together the pieces of our broken family. I worked 2 jobs through college, physical therapy by day and waitressing by night, and when my mother got sick, the medical bills devoured everything I had saved and then reached for more with hungry fingers. He listens without expression, but I catch something shifting in his eyes, something that might be recognition. One survivor acknowledging another across the wreckage of their separate wars. Why did you stay? He asks suddenly, and the question hangs between us like smoke, heavy with implications neither of us wants to name. I stayed because you terrified me, I admit, and the honesty tastes like copper on my tongue. But also because you fascinated me, because when you looked at me, I felt seen for the first time in years, because there is something between us that I cannot explain and cannot escape. The air crackles with electricity, with possibility, with danger, and for a moment I think he might cross the distance between us. Instead, he drains his glass and sets it down with deliberate care, his jaw tight with restraint. Go to bed, Eleanor, he says, and his voice is rough with something I cannot identify. I rise on unsteady legs and walk toward the door, feeling his gaze burning into my back with every step, knowing that something fundamental has shifted between us in this room of shadows and confessions, knowing that sleep will be even harder to find now. Morning arrives with the sound of a door opening somewhere in the penthouse, and I emerge from the guest room to find Marcus Ashworth standing in the living area, a manila folder in his hands, and an expression on his face that suggests he has seen things no amount of money could make him forget. Alexander is already dressed, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably costs more than my car, And he takes the folder from Marcus with the casual authority of a man accustomed to receiving dossiers on innocent people before breakfast. I watch from the hallway as he flips through pages, his expression unreadable, and I find myself holding my breath as though my life depends on whatever information those papers contain, which perhaps it does. Dr. Thomas Fairfax, Marcus reports in a voice carefully devoid of inflection. 41 years old, graduated top of his class from Columbia Medical School, completed his residency at Mount Sinai, divorced 3 years ago with no children, volunteers every other Saturday at the Harlem Free Clinic, no criminal record, no known associations with any organization that might interest us. His most significant financial transaction in the past year was a donation to Doctors Without Borders. He is clean. Alexander should look relieved, but instead his jaw tightens as he stares at something in the folder. And when he looks up at me, there is a new kind of suspicion in his eyes, colder somehow, more calculating. He texts you like you are friends, Alexander says, and the word friends sounds obscene coming from his lips, twisted into something shameful. He asks about your weekend, sends you articles he thinks you might enjoy, uses your first name without your title. I feel heat rising to my cheeks because he is right. Thomas is warm and kind in a way that Alexander is not, in a way that makes the clinic feel safe when the rest of my life has become a minefield. He is just being nice, I protest. But even I can hear how weak the excuse sounds, how inadequate against the evidence of familiarity that Alexander has already catalogued and condemned. I want to meet him, Alexander announces, and the words drop into the silence like stones into still water, sending ripples of panic through my entire body. Please, I hear myself say, and I hate the desperation in my voice, the way fear makes me small when I have spent my whole life fighting to take up space. Please do not do this. He has nothing to do with us. He is just a colleague who has been kind to me. But my pleading only sharpens the suspicion in Alexander's gaze, only feeds the paranoia that lives coiled in his chest like a snake waiting to strike. "What are you hiding?" he asks softly, and the gentleness of his tone is more terrifying than any shout. "Why does the thought of me meeting this man make you so afraid, Eleanor?" And I realize I have no choice but to give him the truth, even knowing how he will receive it, even knowing the explosion that awaits on the other side of my confession. "Thomas knows about you," I admit, and I watch his face go absolutely still, frozen in that terrible calm that precedes the storm. "I told him I was involved with someone dangerous. I needed someone to talk to. I was scared and alone, and he was safe." The word hangs between us, sharp as a blade. Dangerous. I called you dangerous to another man, and in Alexander's world, that is a betrayal that might never be forgiven. The silence that follows my confession is worse than any violence, worse than the shattered glass and splintered wood that still litter the living room from his earlier rage, because this silence is alive with something far more terrifying than anger. Alexander stares at me with eyes that have gone completely flat, black holes where emotion should be. And I watch him process my words with the cold calculation of a man deciding whether to sign a death warrant. "You told him I was dangerous," he repeats, and his voice is so soft I have to strain to hear it, so controlled that every syllable feels like a blade being drawn slowly across my skin. "You sat with another man and discussed our relationship, and used that word, dangerous, as though I am something to be feared, something to be escaped, something you need protection from." I open my mouth to defend myself, but he is already moving, crossing the distance between us with the fluid grace of a predator who has spotted wounded prey, and before I can take a breath, my back is against the wall, and his body is a cage of expensive fabric and barely contained fury. His hands are planted on either side of my head, not touching me, never touching me in anger, but the heat of him radiates through the thin silk of my pajamas, and I feel trapped in a way that has nothing to do with physical barriers. "I needed someone to talk to," I whisper, and my voice sounds small and broken even to my own ears, the voice of a woman who has forgotten how to be brave. I was scared, Alexander. I was drowning in your world, and I did not know the rules, and I needed someone safe to tell me I was not losing my mind. His jaw tightens at the word safe, another condemnation wrapped in 4 letters, another reminder that I sought comfort from someone who was not him. You think he is safe, Alexander says, and something shifts in his expression, something that might be hurt if I believed him capable of that particular wound. You think this doctor with his kind eyes and his gentle texts and his concern for your well-being is safe. But you do not understand what safety costs, Eleanor. You do not understand that the only true safety in this world is power, and I have it, and he does not. He leans closer until I can smell his cologne mingled with whiskey, until his lips nearly brush my ear, until my traitorous heart beats so hard I am certain he can feel it. I am going to show you what dangerous means, he murmurs, and the promise in his voice sends ice water through my veins. We are going to your clinic today, right now, and you are going to introduce me to this safe man of yours, and he is going to understand exactly who you belong to. I want to argue, want to fight, want to tell him that I do not belong to anyone, but the truth is more complicated than simple ownership. He pulls back, and his eyes bore into mine, searching for resistance, for defiance, for any excuse to tighten his grip. Get dressed, he commands. I realize this is not about Thomas at all, but about control, about territory, about proving to himself and to me that no one can take what he has claimed. The clinic looks smaller somehow, with Alexander standing in its fluorescent-lit waiting room, as though his presence has compressed the modest space into something cramped and inadequate, and I watch my coworkers freeze at their stations like prey animals catching the scent of a predator they cannot name but instinctively fear. His suit costs more than our monthly supply budget, charcoal wool that drapes his shoulders like armor, and the 2 men who wait outside in the black SUV are visible through the smudged windows, their bulk and stillness announcing that this is not a social visit. Linda at the front desk stares openly, her fingers hovering over her keyboard, as though she has forgotten what they are for, and I feel the weight of every curious gaze as I lead Alexander through the space where I have built my small professional life. The space that was supposed to be separate from his world, untouched by his shadow. He surveys the worn carpet, the outdated magazines, the motivational posters that promise healing and hope in cheerful fonts, and I can see him cataloging every detail, measuring this place against his marble, floors and original artwork and finding it wanting. Then Thomas emerges from examination room 3, his white coat slightly rumpled, his kind face already shifting from confusion to wariness as he takes in the scene before him, and I watch the exact moment when recognition flickers in his eyes, when he connects the dangerous man I described in our quiet conversations to the dangerous man now standing in his clinic with a smile that contains no warmth whatsoever. Dr. Fairfax, Alexander says, and his voice is silk wrapped around steel, perfectly modulated, terrifyingly polite. I have heard so much about you. I wanted to thank you personally for taking such good care of Eleanor. She speaks very highly of your concern for her well-being. Thomas approaches with the careful movements of a man who understands he is walking into a minefield, but refuses to show fear. And when he extends his hand, Alexander takes it in a grip that lasts a fraction too long, a silent measurement of strength and will. Eleanor is a valued colleague, Thomas replies, and his eyes flick to mine, reading the fear I cannot hide, the silent plea I cannot voice. We are fortunate to have her on staff. Alexander's hand finds the small of my back, proprietary, branding, and I feel the heat of his palm through my scrubs, like a promise and a warning combined. Her partner, Alexander clarifies, and the word lands like a claim staked in hostile territory. I thought it was time I visited her workplace, saw where she spends her days, met the people who matter to her. The air between the 2 men thickens with something unspoken, currents of challenge and assessment flowing beneath the surface of civilized conversation, and Thomas straightens almost imperceptibly, squaring his shoulders in a way that speaks of courage or foolishness, or perhaps both. I suggest we have dinner, Alexander continues, his smile widening into something that shows too many teeth. Tonight, I know a place we can discuss Eleanor's care in more comfortable surroundings. It is not a request, and everyone in the room knows it. And when Thomas agrees with a nod that costs him something, I can see the satisfaction bloom cold and triumphant in Alexander's eyes. The restaurant exists in a world I have only glimpsed through windows, all velvet drapes and candlelight, and waiters who move like ghosts trained to be invisible. And the private room Alexander has secured feels less like a dining space and more like an interrogation chamber dressed in silk and crystal. Thomas sits across from me, his tie slightly crooked in a way that makes my chest ache with something like homesickness for the normal life I used to inhabit, and between us, Alexander presides over the table like a king holding court, his wineglass catching the light as he swirls the burgundy liquid with practiced ease. The conversation flows like poison wrapped in pleasantries, Alexander asking about Thomas's practice, his divorce, his volunteer work at the free clinic on Saturdays, each question delivered with the precision of a surgeon making careful incisions to expose what lies beneath. Thomas answers well, I have to admit, his voice steady, even as I notice the faint sheen of perspiration at his temples, the way his fingers grip his water glass, just a fraction too tightly. He speaks of his passion for medicine, his belief in accessible healthcare, his quiet satisfaction in helping people who have nowhere else to turn, and I watch Alexander catalog every word, every gesture, every micro-expression that might betray something hidden. I try to steer the conversation toward neutral waters, commenting on the food, asking about the wine, playing the role of gracious companion, as though this dinner is not a battlefield, and I am not the territory being contested. The risotto turns to ash in my mouth. Under the table, Alexander's hand finds my thigh, his palm hot through the thin fabric of my dress, and his fingers press into my flesh with a possessiveness that steals my breath, a silent reminder that I am here at his pleasure and by his permission. I cannot look at Thomas without feeling Alexander's grip tighten, cannot smile at a harmless comment without sensing the temperature drop by imperceptible degrees. When Thomas excuses himself to use the restroom, the relief that flickers across his face is quickly masked, but not quickly enough, and I am left alone with Alexander in the candlelit cage he has constructed around us. He leans close, his lips brushing my ear, his breath warm against my skin as he whispers with a softness that terrifies me more than shouting ever could. "If he has ever touched you," he murmurs, "if his hands have ever been on your body in any way beyond the professional, I will know, Eleanor. I will see it in your eyes, and I will see it in his, and there will be consequences that neither of you can imagine." The shiver that runs through me is involuntary, primal, and I turn to meet his gaze with whatever courage I can summon from the wreckage of my composure. "There is nothing between us," I insist, and my voice sounds foreign to my own ears, thin and desperate. "He is my colleague, my doctor, nothing more and nothing less." Alexander studies me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine for deception, for hesitation, for any crack in my certainty that he might exploit. "I almost believe you," he finally says, and the word almost lands between us like a bomb waiting to detonate. Thomas returns from the restroom, and I see it in his face before he even reaches the table. That quiet resolve that settles over people when they have decided to do something brave and possibly stupid, and my heart begins to pound against my ribs because I know what courage looks like when it is about to collide with something that will not yield. He does not sit down immediately, but stands at the edge of the table, his hand resting on the back of his chair. And when he speaks, his voice carries the steady calm of a man who has spent years delivering difficult diagnoses and learning that truth, however painful, is better than comfortable lies. "Mr. Sinclair," he begins, and I want to reach across the table and stop him, want to clamp my hand over his mouth and drag him away from this beautiful, terrible room before he says something that cannot be unsaid. I have worked with Eleanor for 2 years now, and in that time I have come to respect her as a colleague and care about her as a friend. And in recent months, I have noticed changes that concern me deeply as a physician. Alexander's wineglass pauses halfway to his lips, suspended in air like time itself has stuttered, and I watch his eyes sharpen into something predatory, something that sees prey and calculates distance and trajectory. She has exhibited signs of acute stress, Thomas continues, elevated anxiety, disrupted sleep patterns, hypervigilance consistent with someone living under significant psychological pressure. And as her doctor, I have offered her resources, information about support services for people in difficult situations. The silence that follows is absolute, suffocating, a vacuum where sound goes to die, and I feel Alexander's hand on my thigh clench with sudden bruising force as the implication of Thomas's words settles over the table like ash. He is accusing Alexander without accusation, naming the monster without speaking its name, and I see the crack that splits through Alexander's composure for just 1 microsecond before the mask slides back into place, smoother and colder than before. Thomas is misunderstanding, I hear myself say, the words tumbling out in desperate intervention, my voice too bright and too fast, as I try to build a bridge over the chasm that has opened between these two men. I have been dealing with some family issues, financial stress. He has been incredibly supportive. I am fine, really, everything is fine. But Thomas looks at me then, with eyes full of sad knowing. Eyes that have seen this performance before in other examination rooms, with other women who smiled too hard and explained too much, and his compassion cuts deeper than any accusation, because it sees me, truly sees me, trapped in silk, and terrified of what happens when the candles burn down. Alexander rises from his chair with fluid grace, every movement controlled and deliberate, and his smile is a masterpiece of civilized menace as he extends his hand to Thomas one final time. I appreciate your concern for Eleanor's well-being, he says, his voice warm as a winter grave. She is fortunate to have such an attentive colleague looking out for her, but I assure you, she wants for nothing in my care. And now I think the evening has reached its natural conclusion. The car ride back is silence made solid, pressure building in the confined space until I can barely breathe, and when Alexander finally speaks, his voice is quiet with the certainty of a verdict already rendered. He wants you, he says, and those 3 words contain entire universes of accusation and possession and the promise of consequences I cannot yet imagine. The penthouse door closes behind us and something in Alexander fractures, some last restraint that has been holding the storm at bay, finally giving way to the hurricane that has been building since Thomas spoke those damning words about resources and difficult situations, and he rounds on me with eyes that burn like black fire. You encouraged him, he says, his voice rising with each syllable. You sat in his office and played the victim, painted yourself as some trapped princess waiting for rescue, made him think he could save you from me. The accusation lands like a physical blow, and I stagger back, but something in me rises too, some spark of the woman I used to be before silk cages and candlelit prisons, and I hear my own voice crack through the air like thunder. He is my colleague, I shout. He is my friend. He noticed I was falling apart because I am falling apart, because loving you is like loving a forest fire, and I never know when the wind will shift and I will be the thing that burns. The word hangs between us, love. Neither of us expected it, and I watch it register on his face like a wound. But he does not stop. Cannot stop, the jealousy driving him forward as he closes the distance between us with predatory grace. You told him I was dangerous, he snarls. You made yourself available to his concern, his comfort. You let another man think about saving you when you are mine. I back against the wall and he follows, his hands slamming on either side of my head, his body a cage of heat and fury, and I should be terrified. I am terrified, but I am also done cowering. Then stop making me need saving, I scream into his face. Stop being the thing I need saving from. Stop being so cruel and paranoid and impossible that the only person I can talk to is a kind man who does not make me feel like I am constantly one wrong word from catastrophe. He freezes. The words penetrate where nothing else has. I watch the rage drain from his eyes, leaving something worse beneath, something raw and bleeding that he has never let me see. Everyone leaves, he says, and his voice breaks on the words like a ship on rocks. Everyone I have ever trusted has left or betrayed me. My mother, my brother, the woman who sold his location to my enemies. And I cannot lose you, Eleanor. I cannot. The thought of it makes me into someone I do not recognize. His forehead drops to mine, his breath ragged, his hands trembling where they bracket my face with desperate gentleness. I am terrified, he whispers. Every moment of every day I am terrified that you will see what I really am, and run, and I will be left with nothing but empire and ashes. My hand rises without permission, my fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, and he flinches at the tenderness like it burns worse than violence ever could. I see you, I whisper back. I see the monster and the man, and I am still here, not because I cannot leave, but because something in me recognizes something in you. He shudders against me, and I hold him, and in this moment, the predator becomes the prey, wounded and wanting, and I understand that we are both trapped in cages of our own making. The kiss happens like a collision, like two planets that have been orbiting each other finally surrendering to the gravity that has always existed between them. And when Alexander's mouth finds mine, there is nothing gentle about it, nothing tentative, only desperation and hunger and the raw need of a man who has spent his whole life building walls only to watch them crumble at the touch of one woman he cannot control or understand or live without. I should pull away. I should remember everything he is and everything he has done and will do. But my hands are fisting in his shirt and pulling him closer instead. And when he groans against my lips, the sound travels through my entire body like electricity, like lightning, finding ground after an eternity of searching the sky. His hands frame my face with trembling reverence, his thumbs tracing my cheekbones as if memorizing the architecture of someone precious and breakable. And this is not the possessive grip from the restaurant or the bruising force against the wall, but something else entirely, something that terrifies me more than his rage ever could, because rage I understand, rage I can fight against, but this tenderness threatens to undo every defense I have built. We do not go further, not tonight, not when everything between us is still raw and bleeding and uncertain. But when he pulls back to look at me, his eyes are wet and wondering, and I realize I have never seen this man cry, have never imagined he could, and yet here are tears tracking silent paths down the sharp planes of his face as he holds me like I am the only real thing in a world made of shadows. I have never felt this unhinged, he confesses, his voice rough and broken, with anyone, Eleanor, never this terrified that someone could destroy me without lifting a finger, and I hate it. I hate how much power you have over me, and I love it too, and I do not know how to reconcile those truths. I press my forehead to his chest, feeling his heart hammer against my cheek, and I admit what I have been denying to myself for weeks now, whispering into the expensive fabric of his shirt that I am drawn to him even when I am afraid, especially when I am afraid, because something in his darkness calls to something in mine that I never knew existed until he looked at me across a rain-soaked street and saw me when I had been invisible to everyone else for so long. We sleep in his bed that night, with my head on his chest, and his arms wrapped around me like armor, like shelter, like a promise neither of us is ready to make with words. And for a few precious hours, there is peace, there is warmth, there is the steady rhythm of his breathing beneath my ear, as the city glitters indifferent beyond floor to ceiling. Windows. But morning comes the way it always does, dragging reality behind it like chains, And I wake to Alexander already sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone pressed to his ear, his spine rigid with tension that was not there when we fell asleep, tangled together in the aftermath of truth. "Marcus," he says, and his voice has transformed into something cold and commanding, the boss rather than the man who wept in my arms. "Tell me everything." I sit up slowly, the sheets pooling around my waist, and I watch his jaw tighten as he listens to whatever news is being delivered, watch his free hand curl into a fist against his thigh, watch the softness of last night calcify back into the armor he wears against a world that has never given him reason to trust. When he ends the call, he does not turn around immediately, and I count the seconds in heartbeats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, before he finally speaks in a voice emptied of everything except lethal calm. "Victor Carstairs has made his move," he says. "There was a bomb at the warehouse on Pier 17. 3 of my men are dead. And this is only the beginning." The transformation happens in the space between heartbeats. One moment Alexander is the man who held me through the night, with tears on his face and trembling hands, and the next, he is someone else entirely, someone carved from ice and iron and the cold certainty of violence. And I watch this metamorphosis with a fascination that borders on horror as he rises from the bed and begins making calls in a voice I have never heard before, clipped and commanding and utterly devoid of the vulnerability he showed me just hours ago. He issues orders like a general marshaling forces for war, names and locations and tactical considerations flowing from his lips with the practiced ease of a man who has done this many times before, who has sent men to kill and die and never lost a moment of sleep over the mathematics of empire. And I pull the sheets around myself like armor as I realize I am seeing the true face of Alexander Sinclair for the first time, not the jealous lover or the wounded boy, but the crime lord who built a kingdom on blood and fear and the broken bodies of his enemies. When he finally turns to me, his eyes are flat and assessing, scanning my face for something I cannot name, and when he speaks, his voice carries no warmth at all. "You will stay here," he says, and it is not a request or a suggestion, but a command issued with the full weight of his authority. "You will not leave this penthouse for any reason. There will be guards at every exit, and if you try to run, they have orders to stop you by whatever means necessary." I open my mouth to protest, to remind him that I have a job and a life and patients who depend on me, but he cuts me off with a sharp gesture that silences the words in my throat. "Victor Carstairs knows about you," he continues, and for the first time I hear something beneath the ice, something that might be fear if fear could survive in such frozen territory. "He has been looking for my weakness, and now he has found it. You are what he will use to destroy me, Eleanor. Do you understand what that means?" The question hangs in the air between us, and I feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. The realization that the danger I have been living with for 3 months was never really about Alexander at all. That there are wolves circling outside these gilded walls who would tear me apart just to watch him bleed. "I understand," I whisper, and something in his posture relaxes almost imperceptibly. Some tension I had not even noticed releasing from his shoulders as he crosses to the bed and takes my face in his hands with surprising gentleness. "I will end this," he promises, and his lips brush my forehead in a kiss that feels like benediction and goodbye. "I will burn Victor Carstairs and everyone who stands with him, and then I will come back to you and we will finish the conversation we started last night." He is gone before I can respond, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounds like a lock turning, and I am left alone in silk sheets that still smell like him, surrounded by luxury that has never felt more like a prison, waiting for a war I never asked to be part of to determine whether I live or die. The hours stretch like taffy, slow and suffocating, and I find myself pacing the penthouse like an animal learning the dimensions of its cage, counting steps from window to wall, from kitchen to corridor, from one locked door to another, until I have memorized every inch of this gilded prison that smells like Alexander's cologne and broken promises. The guards watch me with careful indifference, two men stationed at the elevator, and one by the service entrance. And they do not speak when I pass, except to remind me that Mr. Sinclair has requested I stay away from the windows, that snipers are not outside the realm of possibility, that my safety is their primary concern in a tone that makes clear my freedom is not. By afternoon, the restlessness has calcified into something sharper, something that feels like the first stirrings of rebellion, and I begin testing doors I have never thought to try before, guest rooms and closets, and storage spaces that reveal nothing more sinister than expensive linens and winter coats that cost more than my monthly rent used to be. But then I find it. At the end of a hallway I have always assumed led nowhere important, a door that does not open when I turn the handle, and the guard who has been trailing me at a distance suddenly appears at my shoulder with something like nervousness flickering across his professionally blank face. "That room is private," he says, and the way he says it makes my skin prickle with the certainty that whatever lies behind this door is something Alexander never wanted me to see. I could walk away, I could return to the living room and stare at walls and wait like the obedient captive I have apparently become, but something has shifted in me since last night. Since I watched the man I am falling for cry in my arms and then transform into a stranger who speaks of war and death with the casual ease of someone ordering coffee. "I need to see," I tell the guard, and I do not recognize my own voice, the steel in it, the quiet command that sounds almost like something Alexander himself might say. And perhaps that is what convinces the man, because after a long moment, he produces a key and unlocks the door with the air of someone who knows he will regret this decision. The room is small and windowless, lit by the blue glow of multiple monitors, and for a moment I do not understand what I am seeing, cannot make sense of the images that paper the walls and fill the screens with their silent testimony. But then, recognition crashes over me like ice water, and I am looking at myself, photograph after photograph of Eleanor Bennet going about her life in blissful ignorance, leaving her apartment and entering her clinic and buying coffee from the cart on 5th Street and sitting alone in the park where she eats lunch when the weather permits. The timestamps on the photos stretch back months, 4 months, 5, long before a mugging in a rainy alley brought Alexander Sinclair into my life like a dark angel offering salvation with one hand and chains with the other. My schedule is pinned to a corkboard, my routine mapped out in Alexander's precise handwriting, and I see notes about my habits and preferences, and the name of my therapist, and the amount I owe on my mother's medical bills, and the fact that I take my coffee with 2 sugars, and always sit facing the door. He was watching me. I whisper to no one, and the guard behind me says nothing, because there is nothing to say. No explanation that can transform this shrine of surveillance into anything other than what it is. "The mugging," I continue, and my voice sounds distant now, disconnected from my body. Was he watching then too? Did he know it would happen? Did he let those men corner me in that alley so he could play the hero? Still, the guard offers no answer, and I understand now that some questions can only be answered by the man who has built this altar to obsession, this testament to a fixation that began long before I ever knew his name. I am still standing there when I hear the elevator doors open hours later, still frozen before the evidence of a lie that rewrites everything I thought I knew about us, and when Alexander appears in the doorway with blood on his shirt and exhaustion carved into the lines of his face, I turn to him with eyes that have forgotten how to cry. "Tell me," I say, and my voice does not waver, even though my hands are shaking. "Tell me everything, or I swear I will find a way out of this building even if it kills me." He does not deny it, does not offer excuses or explanations that might soften the edges of this betrayal, and something in his stillness tells me he has been waiting for this moment since the night he first stepped out of the shadows to save me from men he knew were coming. "I saw you," he says, and his voice is rough with exhaustion and something that sounds almost like relief, as if the weight of this secret has been crushing him as surely as it now crushes me. "I saw you 5 months ago at a coffee shop on Madison Avenue, and I could not look away. Could not stop thinking about the way you smiled at the barista and counted your change twice and held the door for an old woman who did not even thank you. He moves toward me slowly, carefully, like a man approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any sudden movement, and I back away until my shoulders hit the wall covered in photographs of my own oblivious face. The mugging was real, he continues, and I hear the truth in it even as I wish I could not. Victor's men testing my territory, seeing what they could take from the edges of my empire, and when I learned they had chosen your block, your alley, your route home from the late shift you work every Thursday, I knew I could not let them have you, even though you did not belong to me yet. Yet I repeat, and the word tastes like poison on my tongue, like I was already yours before you ever spoke my name, like you were just waiting for the right moment to collect what you had claimed. He flinches at the accusation, but does not retreat, and I see in the lines of his face a man who has never learned to want things gently, who takes and possesses and controls because he does not know any other way to keep the people he loves from disappearing. I try to leave then, push past him and walk toward the elevator with steps that feel like wading through concrete. But I make it only 10 feet before his voice stops me cold, with 4 words that rewrite everything. Victor is watching us, he says, and when I turn back, his expression has shifted into something desperate and raw. His men are in the building across the street, and in the van parked on the corner, and probably in this building too by now. So you can walk out that door and prove a point and die for your principles, or you can stay and let me explain why a broken man saw a beautiful woman and lost his mind. The choice paralyzes me because it is no choice at all, because outside these walls waits a violence I cannot comprehend, and inside them stands a monster who weeps when he holds me and kills men before breakfast, and built a shrine to an obsession he calls love. I stay, I whisper, and the words feel like surrender, but I stay because I want to understand, not because I have forgiven you, and not because I trust you, and not because I have anywhere else to go. He nods slowly and begins to speak, and what follows is a confession that takes hours, that winds through dead brothers and treacherous lovers and an empire built on the bones of everyone who underestimated the boy who watched his family burn. And by the time dawn breaks gray and cold through the windows, I know him completely, this man who saw me and wanted me and moved heaven and hell to make me his. And I still do not know if what I feel is love or Stockholm Syndrome or simply the exhaustion of fighting against a tide that has already pulled me out to sea. I spend the next 3 days cataloging the evidence against him, building a case in my mind like a prosecutor preparing for trial, and the list grows longer with each passing hour until it becomes a litany I recite in the darkness of the room he has given me, the room with the lock he promised never to breach. Criminal, I whisper to myself as I lie awake at 3 in the morning. Stalker, killer, manipulator, liar, a man who watched me for months and engineered our meeting and let me believe in a fairy tale where the dark knight saves the damsel when really he was the dragon all along. But then morning comes, and I hear him moving through the penthouse, quiet footsteps that pause outside my door but never try the handle. And I remember the way he held me through the nightmares that started after I saw a man die at his feet, the way he learned I hate the sound of sirens and somehow made them disappear from our floor, the way he looks at me like I am the first beautiful thing he has seen after years of darkness and ash. He brings me coffee each morning and leaves it outside my door, 2 sugars exactly right, and he does not knock or demand entry or remind me that I am trapped here by circumstances beyond either of our control. And this small act of restraint costs him more than any violence ever could, because I see the way his hands shake when he sets down the cup, see the way he lingers for just a moment before forcing himself to walk away. I am trying to hate him, I realize on the second day, trying to find the clean, bright anger that would make this simple, that would let me divide the world into victims and villains and know exactly where I stand. but he keeps refusing to fit the shape of monster I am building for him, keeps showing me glimpses of the wounded boy beneath the brutal man, until I cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. On the third morning, I open the door while he is still standing there, and the look on his face breaks something in me, such raw hope and terror mingled together, such desperate need held in check by a promise he is killing himself to keep. And I understand finally that this is what love looks like when it grows in poisoned soil, twisted and wrong, but reaching toward the light all the same. I do not forgive you, I tell him, and he nods like he expected nothing else. But I'm still here, and I think that means something. I think that means we are both broken in ways that somehow fit together, even though we should not, even though every rational part of me screams to run. He does not touch me, does not cross the threshold of my room, but he says my name like a prayer, and it sounds different than before. Sounds like the beginning of something rather than the end. We are standing on opposite sides of a door that neither of us built, I think, and somehow we have to find a way through, or around, or maybe just learn to live in the spaces between what he has done and what we might still become, if we are brave enough, broken enough, desperate enough to try. The 3 days that follow exist in a strange suspension, a holding pattern where we circle each other like binary stars caught in mutual gravity, close enough to feel the pull but never quite colliding. And I find myself learning the rhythms of his guilt in the way he pauses outside my door each morning, in the coffee he leaves cooling on the threshold, in the reports I hear him taking in hushed voices about a war I am only beginning to understand. We share meals in silence that grows less oppressive with each passing hour, sit on opposite ends of the same couch while news plays on a television neither of us watches. And sometimes our eyes meet across the distance, and I see the question there, the desperate hope he is too proud to voice, and I look away because I am not ready to answer what I have not yet asked myself. On the second night, he falls asleep in his study, and I find myself standing over him, studying the way exhaustion softens the hard planes of his face, the way his hand still reaches toward a gun, even in dreams, and I pull a blanket over him without thinking, and he does not wake, but he sighs my name, and something cracks open in my chest that I thought I had sealed shut forever. Then on the morning of the fourth day, Marcus arrives with a face like stone and words that shatter everything. Thomas Fairfax taken from the clinic parking lot, 3 witnesses who saw nothing useful, a message delivered to Alexander's personal line in Victor's rasping voice, the doctor for Eleanor, you have until midnight. I watch Alexander receive the news, and what I see terrifies me more than his rage ever could, because this is ice, pure and lethal, a cold so absolute it burns, and when he turns to me, his eyes are the eyes of a man who has already calculated the cost of every possible outcome and found none of them acceptable. This is my fault, he says, and the words are flat and final. My obsession with you painted a target on everyone you have ever cared about, and I will fix this, but you need to stay here where my men can protect you, while I end this war once and for all. But Thomas is innocent, I say, and my voice breaks on his name. He is a good man who made the mistake of caring about someone in your orbit, and now he is going to die because Victor wants to hurt you through me. So you do not get to leave me behind. You do not get to make me wait, while people I care about suffer for choices I never asked to make. He refuses, and I push, and we argue in circles, until I say the only thing that can move him, if you leave me here, I will never trust you again. I will never believe you see me as anything more than a possession to be protected. And this is your chance to prove that what you said about choosing me means something real. His jaw tightens, and for a long moment I think he will lock me in my room and go anyway. But then something shifts behind his eyes, and he nods once, short and sharp, and says, you stay with Marcus, and you do exactly what he tells you, and if anything happens to you, I will burn this city to the ground. And I realize that this is what love looks like in his language, not letting go, but holding on with open hands. The warehouse looms against the midnight sky like a wound in the industrial district. all rusted metal and broken windows and shadows that seem to breathe with malevolent intent. And I watch from the back seat of the armored SUV as Alexander's men move toward it in practiced silence. 12 figures in black dispersing like smoke through the darkness while Marcus sits beside me with his hand on his weapon and his eyes scanning every possible angle of approach. "Stay in the car," Alexander said before he disappeared into the night, his fingers lingering on my cheek for just a moment. "Stay with Marcus, and do not move no matter what you hear," and I promised, because I could see the fear beneath his command, the desperate need to know I would be safe while he walked into a trap designed specifically to destroy him. The first gunshot shatters the silence at 12:07, and then the world explodes into chaos. Muzzle flashes lighting up windows like strobes, the sharp crack of automatic weapons punctuated by screams that could belong to anyone. And Marcus is speaking into his radio in clipped, urgent tones. But I am not listening because all I can think about is Thomas tied up somewhere in that building. Thomas who volunteered at free clinics on weekends. Thomas who only ever wanted to help me. Thomas who is going to die because I was too weak to walk away from a monster who loved me. I am out of the car before I consciously decide to move, my feet hitting concrete as Marcus shouts my name. But I am already running toward the side entrance I watched two of Alexander's men breach moments ago, already pushing through a door hanging off its hinges into a corridor that smells of rust and blood and fear. The gunfire is louder inside, echoing off metal walls until it sounds like the building itself is screaming. And I move through the maze of crates and machinery on instinct, following something I cannot name until I find a room with a single light swinging from the ceiling, and Thomas slumped in a chair beneath it, his face swollen and purple, his white coat stained dark with blood that I pray is not all his. His eyes widen when he sees me, and he tries to speak through cracked lips, but I am already at his side, my fingers working at the ropes binding his wrists, whispering that it is going to be okay, even though I know it might not be. Even though I can hear footsteps approaching that are too measured, too confident to belong to anyone coming to help. "Well, well," says a voice like gravel wrapped in silk, and I turn to find Victor Carstairs standing in the doorway with a gun aimed at my chest, and a smile that makes Alexander's coldest expression look like warmth. The prodigal weakness returns to the scene of her crime. He is older than I imagined, silver hair swept back from a face carved by decades of cruelty, and he steps closer while explaining how predictable Alexander has always been, how his brother died because of this same foolish sentimentality, how history is simply repeating itself with better staging. I move without thinking, placing my body between the gun and Thomas, and Victor laughs like I have told him the most delightful joke, raises his weapon, and I close my eyes against the thunder I know is coming. The shot is deafening. But the pain never arrives, and when I open my eyes, Victor is crumpling to the ground with a red bloom spreading across his chest, and behind him stands Alexander with smoke still curling from his gun, and an expression on his face that I will carry with me until I die, relief and rage and love so fierce it burns. And our eyes meet across the chaos of everything we have survived to reach this moment. The ride back to the penthouse passes in silence so complete, it feels like a physical presence. A fourth passenger in the armored car that carries the weight of everything we cannot yet say. And I sit with Victor's blood drying on my hands, and Alexander's coat wrapped around my shoulders, and the echo of that gunshot still ringing through the hollow spaces of my skull. Thomas is in an ambulance somewhere behind us, Marcus riding with him to ensure he reaches the hospital safely, and the paramedic said he would recover, said the damage looked worse than it was. But I cannot stop seeing his swollen face, cannot stop thinking about how he ended up in that chair because he made the mistake of caring about someone who had already been claimed by a man who treats love like warfare. Alexander does not touch me during the drive, does not speak, just sits with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes fixed on some middle distance I cannot access. And I wonder what he sees there, whether it is Victor falling, or his brother dying, or some future where I look at him, the way Thomas looked at me in that warehouse, with sad knowing and quiet disappointment. The penthouse feels different when we arrive, smaller somehow despite its sprawling luxury, and I walk straight to the bathroom and turn the shower to scalding and stand beneath the water until my skin turns pink and the rust-colored streams running toward the drain finally clear. I do not cry. I thought I would, but there is nothing left, just a hollow exhaustion that goes deeper than bone, deeper than the marrow where fear has lived for so long I had forgotten what its absence might feel like. When I emerge wrapped in a robe that costs more than my monthly salary used to be, I find him waiting in the living room, still in his blood-stained shirt, and our eyes meet across the space that has contained so much violence and confession and desperate wanting. I go to him because there is nowhere else to go. Because after everything I have seen tonight, I understand that the world outside these walls is just as dangerous as the man who built them, and we sit on the couch where this all began, where he first saw Thomas's name on my phone, and shattered the silence of our careful pretense. I cannot unsee who you are, I tell him, and my voice sounds strange in my own ears, scraped raw by screaming and smoke and the prayers I did not know I was whispering when I closed my eyes against Victor's gun. But I cannot unfeel what is between us either, and I do not know how to reconcile those two truths. I do not know how to love someone whose hands have done the things yours have done. He is quiet for a long moment, and then he asks what I want, really want, if I could have anything. I want you to choose me over the Empire, I say, just once. I want to know that I matter more than power. He reaches for my hand, and his fingers are gentle despite everything they have done, and he says, I chose you the moment I saw you, Eleanor. I just did it badly. I did it in the only language I knew, and I am trying to learn a new one. 1 month passes and the world does not end, does not crack apart at the seams the way I expected it to when I made the choice to stay with a man whose hands have ended lives and started wars, and learned to touch me like I am something precious enough to protect from himself. I return to the clinic on a Tuesday morning in October, the autumn light slanting gold through the windows where my coworkers pretend not to stare. And I take my first patient at 9 a.m. and guide elderly Mrs. Patterson through her hip exercises, while outside an armored car waits with the driver who carries a gun under his jacket and knows 14 ways to kill a man with his bare hands. This is my life now, split down the middle like a fruit revealing strange seeds, and I am learning to hold both halves without crushing either. Thomas returns to work 2 weeks after I do, the bruises faded to yellow shadows beneath his eyes, and our first conversation is careful, clinical, two surgeons operating on the wounded thing our friendship has become. I apologize for everything, and he shakes his head and says, I do not need to apologize for surviving, says he has read enough case studies to know that love and danger often wear the same face. And when he walks away, I understand that he has forgiven me, but also released me, drawn a professional boundary that feels like both loss and mercy. Alexander is different now too, or perhaps I am simply seeing him differently. The way you notice new details in a painting you have walked past 1,000 times. Once someone finally turns on the proper light, he has begun dismantling the most violent arms of his empire, delegating the operations that require bloodshed to Marcus and others, spending his evenings with contracts and accountants, rather than the darker business that used to pull him away at midnight with that cold look in his eyes. It is not redemption. I am not naive enough to believe in redemption for men like him, for men who have built kingdoms on bones and fear. But it is change, real and deliberate, a slow turning towards something that might one day look like legitimacy if you squint at it from the right angle. He gives me a key to the penthouse, on a night when rain streaks the windows and the city below looks like smeared watercolors, places it in my palm and closes my fingers around the cold metal and says, This is not a cage anymore, Eleanor. This is a door that opens from both sides, and you can walk through it whenever you want, toward me or away from me, and I will not stop you. I cry then, not from sadness, but from something more complicated, from the recognition that we are two wounded people who have somehow found shelter in each other, two broken things that fit together at the jagged edges. No more surveillance, he promises. No more control, only your choice, every single day. I wake to sunlight streaming through windows that no longer feel like the walls of a cage, and for a moment I simply lie still, letting the warmth pool across my skin while the sounds of the city drift up from 40 floors below, car horns and distant sirens, and the endless heartbeat of a world that keeps turning despite everything that has happened within these walls. The sheets are expensive, soft as water against my bare legs, and I have learned to stop feeling guilty about the luxury, to accept that comfort does not have to come with conditions, that I can enjoy silk against my skin without calculating its cost against my mother's medical bills that Alexander quietly paid off 3 weeks ago without telling me, without asking for gratitude. Just a line item in his accountant's report that I discovered by accident and wept over in the bathroom where he could not see. I turn my head and find him watching me. Those gray eyes that once made my blood run cold, now making it run warm instead. And the intensity of his gaze is the same as it always was. But I have learned to read the language beneath it, to see the wonder where I once saw only possession, the reverence where I once saw only control. "Are you happy, Eleanor?" he asks, and his voice is rough with mourning, with something that might be hope or might be fear. And I understand that this question costs him more than all the blood he has ever spilled, because he is asking me to judge him, to weigh everything he is against everything he has done, and render a verdict he cannot appeal. "I am learning to be," I tell him, and it is the truest answer I can give, not a lie to comfort him, and not a condemnation to punish him, but simply the complicated reality of loving someone whose hands have done terrible things and gentle things in equal measure. He reaches toward the nightstand, and I watch his fingers close around something small, something that catches the light and throws tiny rainbows across the ceiling, and when he opens his palm I see a ring, not ostentatious despite his wealth but elegant, a single stone set in platinum that looks like captured starlight. "This is not a proposal," he says carefully, watching my face for any sign of retreat. "This is a promise, Eleanor. A promise that I will wait, that I will earn you every day for as long as you let me. And if you are ever ready, if you ever want this to mean more, then I will be here. But I am not asking you to decide now. I am not asking you to decide ever. I am just asking you to know that this is what I want, that you are what I want, the only thing I have ever wanted that I cannot simply take." I reach out and lift the ring from his palm, and the metal is warm from his skin, and I slide it onto my right hand, not the left, not yet. And I say not yet, but not never. And the smile that breaks across his face is rare and real, and transforms him into someone I almost do not recognize, someone who exists only in these moments between us. I kiss him then, soft and slow, and outside the window the city hums with danger and possibility and all the darkness we have chosen to walk through together. But inside this room, we have built something fragile and fierce, a love story written in scars and second chances, and I am learning day by day, choice by choice, to be happy.